The Sage Women podcast shares real conversations with women and health professionals, and it's for anyone navigating the ups and downs of midlife. Hey, it's Melanie here on the Sage Women podcast, and I'm really happy to be speaking again to Amanda Menace, a consulting dietitian that we use at Sage and who has a wealth of expertise in all things inflammation and midlife. Amanda, thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I think if I'm thinking about what we're going to get out of today's episode, it's probably answering some of the big questions that women seem to have around this time of what I used to do isn't working, or my body doesn't like certain things, and what do I do now? So I figured that could be our topic of conversation. Does that sound okay?
That sounds wonderful. I think we all go through that.
We absolutely do. And just to kick off, I wonder if you could give us a bit of backstory about you. How did you become a dietitian, and what type of work do you do? What type of clients do you see?
Wonderful. So I'm an accredited practicing dietitian. So I've been a dietitian for over 20 years. And I've been mainly running telehealth clinics since 2019, so just before COVID. How I got into dietetics is originally trying to manipulate and change family members, seeing habits that weren't useful. I thought if I knew more about healthy eating and diet and you know how to make changes to our lifestyle to get healthier, then I would be able to manipulate family members to do that. I wasn't successful in that at all. But it has given me a lot of, I'm very thankful for being a dietitian because my health has taken many twists and turns over the years. And I think having those knowledge and skills has really helped me succeed through those periods better than I would have if I didn't have that background. And it's allowed me to kind of, even with my practice with my clients, a lot of things I have had to figure out for myself. So becoming the dietitian and dietitians always go through this lifelong learning journey. So you're always learning both the theory, but the practicalities of implementing that. So I practice that a lot with my clients, but also with myself, what works in reality, what's not going to work. So it's been really useful in terms of that midlife change, working through, you know, exhaustion, weight changes, mood shifts, all of that in terms of what I know as a dietitian and what I can do to change that as well.
I love your honesty. Thank you for being honest about your reasoning, but I'm sure that was coming from the right place.
Yes.
Not from wanting to be powerful, but for wanting to make a positive change to the people that matter most to you.
Yeah, and I think that's what we all want to do, isn't it? Make our own lives and everyone's around us a bit better would be nice.
Yeah. And I suppose thinking about the things that women are dealing with, you talked about some of the things like weight gain and hot flushes and tiredness and things. Is there a common root cause? I mean, we're doing a lot of work with Michael Liebman on causality and what are the many factors in someone's life and life history that might contribute to what happens to them in midlife. But I wonder if there is, from your point of view, something that most people need to pay attention to, which may or may not be food.
Yeah, look, there's a couple of things that I realise now are more important than I did 5 years ago. So I'm 45 now, 46 this year. So pre-40s, I would have said focus on your food. Focus on, you know, and particularly inflammatory, you know, the processed food, the fast food, all of those kind of things, getting those out and getting your your fruit and veggies and your things that reduce your inflammation up. Going through a bit of a transition myself and watching my clients, you know, we do the right things, the things that we're told we should do, and it still doesn't work. And I think stress and sleep are probably the two that are the most neglected, that I think have much more impact than most people realize. We can keep doing all of the things that we're doing and run on autopilot and get the work done, get the kids looked after, maybe look after the parents, maybe look after other family members, any other life commitments that you've got, and you can still eat, and you can still, do all these things. But once the stress and the sleep become affected, it's as though nothing else works properly. Even if you are ticking the right boxes with your food, the food, I feel like it all, they're all the 1%ers. And so if we're not doing all of them, if there's one thing that affects, and different things affect different people, if you're missing that thing for you in the whole puzzle, it's not going to come together. So there's a lot of trial and error, unfortunately, to find the things. But I think inflammation, stress, and sleep are very underrated.
Could you give us a little bit more of an example about one of those and how it might impact somebody's weight, metabolism, energy, those sorts of things?
Let me think about this one. A couple of things are coming to mind. So what's coming to mind is in clinic, what I see a lot. I've got a body composition scanner, an old one, and in body 220, I think it is. And what it does is it breaks down so I can see the lean muscle mass. I can see muscle, at different parts of the abdomen, arms and legs. And I can see body fat, abdominal body fat, and where it sits on the body. And many ladies come in and, they're following the meal plans, they're doing everything okay, but that stubborn body fat around the middle isn't moving. And on paper, everything looks great. They're getting enough protein in, their calories are where they need to be, they might be doing some strength training or some activity, but it's just not budging. And it would have for them in their 30s, maybe. Often we'll start talking about stress and sleep. And I say nearly 100% of the time, there is stressful things going on in their lives that they can't control. And when we're stressed, we don't sleep very well either. So they go hand in hand. Now we know that there's evidence around sleep that if we're getting less than 6 hours sleep, our insulin's going to go up. It's going to make us hungrier, and we're going to eat more. That's going to contribute to the weight not going. But even when these women control their calories in and all of that, so they're not eating more, it's just holding on. So I think the cortisol level comes in, and cortisol kind of blocks us from burning that body fat off. And until we kind of figure out for ourselves how to control our stress, then it's going to be really, really difficult. And I know that, like, a personal example of feeling that is not probably about nearly close to 18 months ago now, my father passed away. And I went down to his hometown. I was organising a lot of things, and I went down the week of the funeral a bit earlier, and my sister and I were staying in some accommodation, and I said to my sister, like, I've just got to eat really clean while I'm here because I know that I will gain, a couple of kilos if I don't. So I was very, very careful with my diet all week. I'd been there for 3 or 4 days before the funeral. I tried on my clothes before I left home for the funeral. The day of the funeral, they were very tight. And I was eating very cleanly. I was not sleeping well, and I was stressed. But the actual food was very clean, and I was very aware of not overdoing my portions and having salads for lunch and plenty of water and all of the things. And I gained 2 kilos. It probably took me 6 months to get those couple of kilos off. It wasn't food that put them on. That was hormones.
Very stressful time in your life. Yeah.
Yeah, it was lack of sleep and it was stress. I was going back to a very busy stressful work environment. I was traveling for work. I had too much on. And then I had to kind of figure out states and, all of that stuff then. So it was a lot. And it was just, 2 kilos. It was literally like I just had to look at the cake, as they say, and it went straight to my hips. But yeah. So it's as a dietitian, it's very humbling to know that it wasn't the food that put on the weight. And this is what I spent the last over 20 years talking to people about, how to control their weight with food. And maybe that's not the whole picture. Maybe there's this other bit that that we're missing. So I've brought a lot of wellness coaching into my practice over, the last decade, really, and it's been, that's why, because there's other parts of our lives that happen besides what we eat.
Thank you for sharing that very personal story, but it really does illustrate how impactful the other parts of our life can be. Even if you're doing all of the things, there's a tipping point at which you can only do so much with food.
Exactly. I think most people kind of know, if you ask them, when you're stressed, do you lose weight, do you gain weight, or do you stay the same? A lot of people will lose weight or gain weight from stress. It's a hormonal response that's happening in our body.
Yeah. And at midlife, we have these compounding stresses and also menopause, hormones in disarray. And then, of course, I'm thinking about the other things that I've experienced, and I know others too. We know that the liver shrinks and the thyroid becomes less active and all of those sorts of things. So once upon a time, for those who drink alcohol, you might have had 2 or 3 glasses of wine with no comeback, and now it's half a glass and you've got a migraine and you can't sleep. Or you eat spicy food and then you can't sleep. Or then you have red meat too late in the day, too close to bedtime, or too much, you can't sleep. And on and on and on it goes. Too much sugar at night, you can't sleep. So there's this, I'm sure you've come across this too, Amanda, this sensitivity to things that what you used to be able to get away with, you no longer can because your body says,
Exactly. And that sensitivity keeps changing. That's the tricky part. You think you've got it sorted, you know what you can do, and then all of a sudden, and I love that the not sleep. That's quite like, I think, okay, I've got things under control. My sleep has been great for a few months, and then all of a sudden I'll have this week, and then I'll start to reflect on what I was doing, maybe differently, what may have crept back in. So Yeah, it's interesting. Over Christmas when you're relaxed, that little that one alcohol maybe after dinner that came back for a few days in a row over Christmas, and then you're like, why am I not, awake for a few hours in the night, and then you don't have it for a few days, you have another one, you don't sleep. Oh, can't even have a drink anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot to adjust to, and I think that maybe the hard thing is, and the opportunity is that change is suddenly thrust upon you without your permission in a way. It just happens, and there's uh, a cascade of change that happens at that time, and then we've got to respond to that somehow. And if, like I did in the beginning, even though I know a lot and I specialize in behavior change as you do, stubbornly resisting the idea that anything's happening, struggling to accept it, saying, well, no, I'm just going to soldier on and do this anyway. It kind of doesn't work and it just makes things worse. And then that leads me to ask you about what are some basic principles that are helpful for people at this stage of life that in terms of the eating, let's just keep it to that scope for the moment and then look more broadly. But in terms of food and eating, what are the top tips that you have for people at this stage, the adjustments that they might need to make?
Yeah. Yep. So there's a few kind of simple ones, I suppose. Prioritizing protein is really important, and that's because our we're likely it's a time where we can lose muscle quickly if we don't support it, and muscle is really built on protein. So if you think about the inside of our muscles being like a brick wall, and each brick is a muscle fiber. We're constantly losing bricks, so we get these gaps within our muscle. So that doesn't mean we're losing strength necessarily. It means we're losing muscle mass. If we lose too many bricks, obviously, the bricks that that hold the wall there have to do a lot more. But if to replace a brick, we need protein to do that. They're the building blocks. So protein breaks down to amino acids. Amino acids have always been referred to as building blocks because they come and make these bricks and replace our brick wall. Now, in our 20s, compared to our 60s, it takes 3 times as much protein to replace one brick.
Wow.
And that
in our 60s.
Yeah. And that keeps going up. So by the time we get to 60, we're needing 3 times as much protein just to keep our muscle mass. So I would be aiming for that 1.5 grams per kilo, like to 1.5 grams per kilo of body weight to really keep your protein. So if you're doing strength training, 5 days a week, go to the 1.5. But we need that protein. And the other thing that happens with our protein is we become less efficient. So it's like we become like old mobile phones. Like a new mobile phone, you can charge really quickly and it'll keep its battery life. The old mobile phone, you've got to keep charging it. Otherwise, it just runs out of battery and doesn't work. The protein synthesis goes like an old mobile phone. We've got to keep charging it throughout the day. When you're in your 20s, you can eat that big meal at night and you get enough protein and you're done. And you'll be fine. And that will work. Unfortunately, our muscles are getting older and less efficient at doing it all at once. So we've got to spread that protein charge throughout the day.
Right. And can we just talk about those numbers? Because 1.5 grams per kilo body weight is great. So if you're 60 kilos, that means you need 90 grams of protein, right?
Yeah.
But what is that? Because you can get a 100-gram piece of steak But we're not talking about that, are we? We're talking
No,
about the
no.
fact that the 100-gram piece of steak has about 25 grams of protein in it.
Yeah, exactly. Like 3 eggs is 15 grams of protein. Like people think eggs are high protein. That's, if you're having eggs every day for breakfast, you may only be getting 10 to 15 grams of protein if that's the only thing you're having for protein at breakfast. So so you're probably aiming for that at least 25 grams of protein at breakfast would be a good guide.
And so we're looking at animal proteins have roughly twice or more the amount of protein than plants, but plants are good to eat for various reasons, including fiber. How would you get, let's say you're a 60-kilo woman and you want to get 90 grams of protein a day. How do you physically do that between those meals? That's the
it's a lot of
proteinistas
food.
are all asking, like, how do I do that?
It's a lot of food. It's the simple strategic changes. So if you like yogurt, so a normal yogurt might have 6 to 8 grams of protein in it. A Greek yogurt might have 8 to 10 grams of protein in it. Some of the higher protein yogurts on the market, which you can still get in Greek or pretty much whatever now, they're up to 12 to 20 grams of protein per serve. So if you just make that simple swap in the brand and choosing the high protein one, you might have gone from 6 to 20 grams in your yogurt. So if you're, simple things like if you're having a bit of fruit, can you add a high protein yogurt, a couple of spoons on top? Like, what can you do to bring these really high protein foods in to the meal? You don't necessarily have to make it bigger, but you have to be more conscious of what the meal's got in it, what those ingredients have actually got in it. And it's often just simple swaps, starting to look at the labels and choosing a higher protein option. Yeah, because otherwise we'll be eating for the sake of eating, and no one wants to do that.
Yeah, there is still a calorie consideration as well, right? If you're going to eat too much and be inactive, then you're going to start gaining weight.
Exactly. So studies show that just increasing your protein, you're not going to gain weight. But if you're increasing protein that's got extra fat and carbs and you're having too many calories, yes, you're going to gain weight. But if you just kind of focus on, if you're a normal healthy eating and you up your protein, something else is amiss if you're gaining weight. That shouldn't be the cause of the weight gain. And often it's quite confusing for people because they'll jump on the scale and say, I've gained weight. Yes, you may have gained weight because you're actually filling up your muscles. You're building those bricks up.
Which burn fat.
Yeah, so that takes more, if you're building lean muscle, that's more calories to sustain your body. You've got to sustain. So your metabolic rate, your basal metabolic rate is going to increase. So you can potentially keep having more calories because you've got more muscle to maintain. And that's going to lead to, if you're eating the same number of calories and you're burning off more calories, you're going to burn off that body fat. So yes, you may be gaining weight, but if you're looking at your waist circumference, it might be going down. So you can look at, we know that people, just because they weigh the same amount on the scales doesn't mean they have the same amount of muscle, the same amount of body fat. You can have these quite lean, very strong people often weigh more than you'd expect them to weigh.
Yeah.
So that weight, the scale is not very helpful, and it's not very helpful for women in midlife who are starting strength training and eating more protein to protect their muscles, because then they think they're not losing weight. Yeah, they may not be losing weight, but their body composition may be changing slowly in the right direction, but they give up because they don't think they're getting the results that they want. They're getting the results they need, just
not what they're used to, what they expect.
Not what they expect.
Yeah, I think we come from this generation, or I certainly have noticed this, where women grew up saying I had to clean the plate as a kid, so we get trained to eat bigger portions as kids, you know. And then there's also then the dieting mentality that we were brought up with in the 80s and even the 90s to some degree of cutting calories and restricting whole food groups and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
We still have it feels like there's a bit of a hangover from those days where we had all of these ideas about how we should change things, but we're not
Yeah.
actually.
There's so much misinformation out there. Like often, even just nuts. Good, healthy, high protein snack. I get people say all the time, I can't have too many nuts because they're too high in fat and too high in energy. But they're a really good healthy fat, and they're high in protein. They're a good little snack. And there's evidence now come out that 50 grams of nuts, if you're having more than 50 grams of nuts, you naturally eat less over the day. So you're going to eat less calories everywhere else because they are quite filling, and they're an anti-inflammatory food. But people avoid them like a plague because the old too much calories, too high in fat message is out there. So, they'll potentially go for a very high processed protein muesli bar type thing or other snack on the run because they haven't kind of sat down and gave their food that consideration.
So interesting, isn't it? It's a complicated thing to understand food, and so perhaps it's easy to take some of that messaging that we get and go, oh, well, I should do this or I shouldn't do that, or that, to have to dig in and understand it can be quite complicated. And I know a few people going through this at the moment, trying to figure out, well, how do I get enough protein and how much carbohydrate should I have at a meal, and all of those sorts of things people are asking. I'm wondering if there's something else. Maybe we could talk about carbohydrates a bit, and maybe what changes at midlife with regards to sugar and carbs, and what should we be doing and eating or not eating?
Definitely, yeah. So definitely there's a lot of hormonal fluctuations that, are related to insulin sensitivity that are associated like with our carbohydrates and cravings and weight gain and all of those things. So yes, we still need carbs, but as that protein level or requirement goes up, the need for carbs comes down. So it's not as though all of a sudden we need more calories. We need the same amount of calories. And if we're looking at carbs and protein together, then per gram, carbs and protein have roughly the same amount of energy in them. So, it's a good time to start thinking, well, if I'm adding more protein than on the same plate, then is there something that I don't need in terms of carbohydrate on my plate? But also when you're having your carb, rather than just grabbing the Vegemite on toast and running out the door in the morning, is there a way that you can put some protein with it? Can you pair it with protein? So that will slow down that insulin response. It will slow down those blood sugar fluctuations. Often, I don't know if people out there or yourself, Mel, have experienced like you think, oh, I'm a bit hungry. I'll grab a quick piece of toast, or I'm not even that hungry, but I know I should eat. I'll grab a quick bit of toast. And then all of a sudden you go, I could eat 6 pieces of toast.
And some biscuits and some fruit. And it
yeah,
goes on and on and on. This craving, grazing cycle of.
Exactly. So
I know that.
You know that one?
Yeah.
I think we all know that one, especially when we're tired, we get the one a bit more. So if we pair the carbs, if we start with, if we can change it to the whole grain carbs and then pair it with a protein, we're more likely to keep that carb craving cycle at bay.
Okay. So what would you put on a bit of toast, like some smoked salmon or?
Oh, smoked salmon.
That's probably a bit fancy. Some people are probably going, ooh.
No, some cottage cheese with some smoked salmon would be amazing. some a really filling breakfast is some burger bread with some peanut butter and some strawberry, or some peanut butter and some apple.
Nice.
Very, very filling, and you're getting a carb hit. Yeah, and you're getting a little bit of fruit, and you're getting some whole grains, but you're also pairing that with that protein. Yeah, there's even a bit of cheese and tomato. Like, it doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to be hard. The old sardines is really good, but a lot of people can't. The oldies still love them.
Yeah, my mum loves sardines. I'm going,
Yeah.
good, because more protein's needed. She's had some health issues that require her to, and she's been told to eat more protein. She said she ate a whole can of salmon, and I was going, oh, it smells like cat food. But she loved it.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
everyone's cup of tea, but
No. But there is a cheaper, simple option that doesn't have to be fancy, and doesn't have to be hard to prepare. So a lot of those Instagram things of kind of, we've got so used to seeing all these fancy ingredients. We don't need to spend a lot of money to have a higher protein diet either. So you can do it with legumes and things like that as well. Yeah.
in fact, I'm thinking about, I just had lunch. I had some tofu and hummus
Nice.
with some salad, and that was really yummy. And I know I've got some fiber and some protein in there, and two sauces, and then you can make sure, am I getting enough calories? And I find that's a really nice go-to, because some people, you probably come across this a lot, say, I don't want to eat red meat anymore. I can't stomach, I can't digest certain things easily. So how do we get the
Yes.
protein in?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and I think that the flip side of that too is some people hear that, I can have a bit more protein and go, oh, I love my red meat. So yes, it is very individual, and we do have that. Like, if we go back to the canned, we're getting chickpeas in cans that have got a little sauce on it. There's so many different options now. I think in some of the programs that I do, the people are looking at food labels, they're going to the supermarket, they're trying different things, and then they're coming back and telling me. And it's amazing what they can find when they're looking for protein, and even often lower carb. I would not focus on lower carb, I'd focus on the high protein. Often when that food manufacturers add more protein to food, no one will buy it if people are watching weight, they're still going to make it not ridiculously high in calories. And often some of the carbs come out. So I often get that question with the yogurt, like, it'll have too much sugar or have something. Like, the high protein yogurts are very low in carbohydrate. They don't have a lot of added sugar. They're very
And
lean.
fat.
And fat, yeah.
Really low, yeah.
So it's worth looking at the labels, because you don't know what you don't know. And you might find something that you didn't expect to find. Yeah, I don't often give brand information or anything, because I'm in the country in the middle of nowhere with a tiny little supermarket. But also, when I've done a lot of telehealth clinics, like everyone's shopping at different places, and you'll suggest something and then you still won't have it. Getting on Woolies online or Coles online is really good, because you can see the products and you can click on the ingredients and the nutritional information panel, and you can see how much protein's in there. So you don't even have to walk around the shops for ages. Just if you're thinking about a product, pop it into Woolies online or Coles online and have a look at those. So that can be really helpful when you're doing your menu planning.
Great tip. That's a great tip. I think before we wrap up today, one other thing I'd like to ask you about is cholesterol, because you're seeing a lot of women getting diagnosed with high cholesterol, asking for a friend. and particularly the LDL cholesterol. And I've heard different stories about this. A naturopath told me once that LDL cholesterol was seen to increase in women that drank unfiltered coffee, like espresso coffee, and that was a factor. And we can look at all those nitty-gritty factors, but considering cholesterol changes that might happen for some women, what are some dietary things or other things that we could do
Yeah.
for cholesterol?
So the LDL, so that why it happens first is that estrogen keeps that LDL or the bad cholesterol lower and keeps our good cholesterol high. So as the estrogen comes down, that LDL cholesterol comes up. So the bad cholesterol just what it does is its role is to take the stuff that's floating around in our blood back to the liver for processing. So it's not something that we're eating that's making our cholesterol bad. It's the liver proteins that are floating around that are supposed to clean up the blood. So there's not as many of them at the moment. So what we've found is that there's these things called, so if it's your LDL, so I think that's very important. People come in and say, doctor said my cholesterol's high, but they don't know what part of their cholesterol. So targeting your triglycerides is very different from targeting your LDLs. LDLs often, come up in women during menopause, perimenopause. And it's the most effective way to do that is to increase your plant sterols. Now, they're in nuts and lots of different things, but the difficulty is the clinical requirement is well over what we can get in our diet. So that's why we see things like Proactive and Logicol. Now we've got the Heart Smart milk, we've got cholesterol lowering wheat bix, and we've got the live active cheese. They've all got these plant sterols, enough of them to actively reduce our cholesterol. Now, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I think it's like something like 10% that they can do that. So I'm just going to quickly Google.
So we've got fortified foods that we can eat to get the plant sterols up, and I'm guessing there's also things like fiber and other things that help, or not?
Not so much for the LDLs, for the targets. So it's the plant sterols that will really have a difference, a clinical difference on those blood levels. You can get those plant sterols if you don't want to eat wheat bix or the live active cheese or the Heart Smart milk, or add more margarine to your diet if you're trying to lose weight. You can get the plant sterol supplements. They're just called plant sterols, or Blackmores have a cholesterol health or cholesterol something one, and it's very good for targeting that. So they do reduce it significantly, but I think that, so here we go. The two. Sorry, Mel, I'm being really rude, and I'm just trying to find this.
It's okay. You're looking for your stats.
Yeah. So 1 tablespoon of the margarine, 25 grams once a day, is, no, it's here. It's close. I'm very close. It's faded out. But it's significant. We'll pop it in the show notes maybe. Yeah. So it does it enough, and it works. There we go. The average 10% reduction over 3 weeks.
Wow,
10%
3 weeks
is a lot. So the reason why doctors don't promote this is that the half-life is only stays in your system for the 24 hours that you've had it. So if you go away on holidays and you don't do it anymore, your risk for heart disease from, higher cholesterol, blockages or whatever that you're trying to clean up with cleaning up your LDLs is back to where it was.
Right.
Whereas cholesterol medication has that accumulative effect, but the reduction isn't much better. So it's If you're going to reduce them with your plant sterols, it's probably about using a range of products and making sure that you're having them every day, or using the supplements. But if you're not consistently going to use them, and your doctor's advising medication, always follow your doctor's advice. But look, I say to clients, if they've come in and they're not on medication, the doctor's saying, I'll give you 3 months, right, let's do it. Let's show him how good you can get it. So diet does play a role in helping us through midlife. And it can be a very powerful piece of the puzzle.
And I think something I'm taking away from this conversation is that if we're looking at our food choices differently, we might get better bang for buck. For example, you mentioned the high protein yogurt. Just making simple swaps can just help us meet our nutritional needs. And I'm thinking also about calcium as part of that yogurt. And then if we add fruit to that, then there's fiber, and then that yogurt is low fat. And so there's those slightly smarter choices tick lots of boxes rather than just one. And suddenly you become really clear on a list of foods that's kind of your optimal list for good health at midlife. It feels like that anyway.
Yeah. And look, what I always tell people is focus on one really, really effective change than trying a billion things at once. Because if you get one really effective change that's maybe going to help your bowels or give you a bit more energy or stop some food cravings, you can practice that while getting those results. Where if you try everything, it can often feel very hard, particularly if you've already tried brain fogged, all of these things. If you've got to remember to do a million things, it's probably not going to stick. So decide which one you want to action and focus on that one. And then once that's become something that you don't have to think about anymore, then add the next one.
Really, really great insights, Amanda. Thank you so much. Feel like we need to do a part 2 and a part 3 to this because there's so many other things we could talk about today. But thank you for your time and for sharing your experience and insights and wisdom and your personal stories too. It's been really interesting and helpful.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Mel.